Alrighty, everybody. We are here today with two very special guests. One is Penny Hess. She is the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the solidarity component of the African People's Socialist Party, leading the movement for white solidarity with black power and reparations under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who we had the great pleasure and honor of interviewing just a few weeks back, and attorney Leonard Goodman, who is a criminal law attorney based in Chicago. Leonard and Penny, thank you guys both very much for being here today.
Glad to be here, Keaton.
Thank you so much for having us on.
Of course, it was a great pleasure to interview Omali. That was probably about a month and a half ago by now, if my memory serves me right. He's a fascinating guy. You guys are just a really fascinating organization. You know, you remind me and my co-host Russell, who's flying right now. Otherwise, he'd be here with me. His flight got pushed back a few hours, so he couldn't make this. He was supposed to have landed by now, but he has not left the airport. That's the state of American capitalism, right? When you try to get on a Boeing airplane, right? But we were both just in awe of the Uhuru movement as a representation of left success in America, a left that has actually built itself and has sustained itself. And that strikes me and my partner, I know I could speak for him, as a major reason why Uhuru is under attack right now. So before we go any further, do you want to explain just the nuts and bolts of this case? What is going on? Obviously, a trial is coming up in less than a month, September 3rd. And this is a home stretch push to raise as much awareness about this and generate as much action around it. So before we go any further, what is the case? What are the charges?
Well, they're, as you say, this group has been around since the 70s. They are, left black radicals, I guess you could say. Penny can describe it better, but the charges are, it's an obscure charge that they are secret Russian agents operating in the U.S. Now, they've been around since the 70s. Their positions have not changed. They're anti-colonialists, they're leftists, they're anti-war. They've always been an international organization. It's in their platform. They seek international allies. Penny, again, can tell you better than me. They've been to many countries and allied with foreign nationals in Ireland, all over Africa, and Spain, and in Russia. And this wasn't a problem until the spring of 2022, when they were speaking out against the support for fueling the war in Ukraine. They were contradicting the narrative, the official narrative, that this was an unprovoked invasion. And Omali was giving speeches saying, that this was provoked, that NATO, and these are speeches that he'd been giving for decades about NATO expansion. They had been criticized the coup in 2014 at the time in Ukraine, where they replaced a Russia-friendly president with a NATO-friendly president, and the arming of Ukraine and the dangerous provocation. So they've been out there doing that. It wasn't a problem until the spring of 2022, after Russia invaded Ukraine, and then it was a problem. And then in July, Penny, again, can just tell you what happened, but they were raided by FBI SWAT teams. Their homes, their offices, all their files were seized. And it was a quite violent raid. So that's basically where we're at. We're set for trial September 3rd under this obscure statute, which is meant to target secret foreign agents, foreign operatives that are operating in the U.S. It's been used rarely. And it's a very dangerous case. It seems to be a direct assault on our rights of dissent. And sort of upping the scale a little bit from censorship to actual prosecution of activists.
Penny, you have anything to add to that?
Well, I do think that, first of all, I want to thank you for having us on. And I want to salute Attorney Goodman, who is just an amazing, brilliant legal expert on the First Amendment, and our legal team, who are just a fantastic legal team that's going to win and take this on. And of course, I want to salute Chairman Omali Shatella, who is my leadership, who has given so much political and historical context to this case, because this case is a continuation, if you will, of the kind of attacks on the Black liberation movement of the 1960s, something that was known as COINTELPRO, for one, that included at that time the assassinations of Fred Hampton, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, infiltration into Black organizations. And it came about as a response to the struggle of Black people, or African people, as the African People's Socialist Party says, that was fighting for political and economic power over their lives, going beyond the question of racism, but the question of power, which is actually what the African People's Socialist Party has always worked for. It has always said that it's not enough to just take on the ideas in white people's heads, but that African people had a right to have power over their lives to make sure that nobody with bad ideas in their heads could ever hurt Black people again. And they also, work with African people all around the world as one people, and want to see the liberation of Africa as the birthright of African people, which is still very colonized today. So it's a very important, critical worldwide movement.
Well, you mentioned Fred Hampton and the Black Power movements of the past, and one of the things I remember we brought up with Omali, and it seems even more morbid to put it this way, that because he's not here, but part of the reason why he's such a rarity, such a unique figure, is because a lot of people who came up with him are dead.
That's so right. That is so right. And just to say that one of the things that Chairman Omali Shatella did was create a white solidarity committee with the mandate to go into the white community, to organize other white people to, first of all, just recognize the conditions that Black people or African people live in inside this country, and to stand in solidarity with Africans all around the world, with the Palestinian people, with the indigenous people here, and to recognize that this question of colonialism, the fact that white people sit on a pedestal and have resources, and even generally the opportunity to experience democratic rights, comes at the expense of the taking away of rights of so many other people around the world. And I think it's really important for us as white people to recognize this when we see the struggle in the world today. I mean, every place is a hot spot, and certainly the heroic Palestinian people have just been, amazing in making the struggle that they are taking on right now. But this is the question, and where do we stand? And this is why the question of reparations has always been critical to what the White Solidarity Committee has always put out in the white community. Reparations are owed to African people. And the party started putting that out in the early 1980s, before anybody even knew what that word meant. And now, we see it everywhere. The question of reparations is a mass demand. And, there's stolen labor, stolen resources, things like Tulsa, Oklahoma, the burning of a whole city, and, just so many examples of just terror and theft and oppression of the Black community in this country right here, that we have to recognize that. And that's why we fight for reparations to the African community as justice. This is what is owed.
Okay, well, now we're going to get into what we call in the business the call to action. So this is some material that you guys sent over. We're happy to put this up on the screen here. All out to St. Petersburg, Florida, this freedom summer. So I'm going to read a little bit from this press release that you guys sent. On July 29th, 2022, the U.S. government initiated violent military-style assaults on 7 offices and homes of the African People's Socialist Party and Uhuru movement in 2 cities and states, St. Louis, Missouri, and St. Petersburg, Florida. 9 months later, 3 members of the Uhuru movement, African People's Socialist Party Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Penny Hess, who's of course here with us now, and Jesse Novell, 2 white leaders of the party's Solidarity Front, were indicted under charges of being Russian agents. This is one way the colonial government is attempting to stifle any criticism of the U.S. for its ongoing mistreatment of African people within this country. It is also a way to muzzle our criticism of the bloody war the U.S. and NATO is making against Russia in Ukraine. It is also an attempt to quell our participation in elections as a means to change our conditions. With Freedom Summer, we will do everything necessary to bring our people and others back into active political life in defense of our rights to organize and speak out for the freedom of speech, to advocate and organize for our total liberation from colonialism based on the Bill of Rights of the U.S. Constitution. The Uhuru Three have an extraordinary team of lawyers that is quite capable of defeating the colonizers in court based on their own law. But this is a political case where the state uses the law as cover for lawlessness by the colonizers. In order to win, our lawyers must be armed with the obvious political support of masses of Africans and others whose participation exposes to the state that we know who the real criminals are. We must put the state in a position that every effort made to railroad the Uhuru Three by targeting constitutionally protected speech and actions exposes the rot of the system and deepens the crisis that has already driven it to frenzy. And there are a couple different events that we're going to highlight in a moment, but I want to ask Leonard here, this statement here, this is a political case where the state uses the law as cover for lawlessness by the colonizers. Leonard, I assume you did not write this, but I assume that you agree with that. So do you want to give your legal opinion on the significance of that framing?
Well, what I'll say is I've never seen another case like this where the indictment, the overt acts in the indictment are political speech. Every single overt act that's charged against my client and her colleagues they gave a speech, they published an article, they opposed the war, they held a rally. So I've never seen anything like that. And I think the other shocking thing is that despite this attack on the First Amendment, and really what this is, I would say this is the government trying to create a Russia exception to the First Amendment. I know we used to talk about in the business criminal law that there used to be a drug exception to the Fourth Amendment. They're looking for a Russia exception to the First Amendment, and it's incredibly dangerous. And despite that, we've had almost zero coverage in the mainstream press. So I want to salute DueDissidence, Keaton and Russell for giving coverage to this case. And it's really relied on alternative media. And thank you to them. You know, we've had, if it wasn't for alternative media, we'd have no coverage at all. So thank you.
Also, I mean, yes, it's obviously a great honor to be able to, chip in however we can to help you guys through this. But someone with far greater reach than us is Tucker Carlson, who interviewed Omali Yeshitela. And then, as if that wasn't that didn't give him a big enough platform, he spent a good deal of his time on the Joe Rogan podcast talking about this as well, which gets exponentially even further reach on top of that. So what has been, and forgive me if this is getting a bit sidetracked, but what is your reaction to that? Because a guy like Tucker is so commonly associated with the right, and yet he is really the only mainstream media figure. Not that he's on TV anymore, but he's still mainstream in the sense that he has a huge reach. To give this any real airtime and to actually advocate for the principle of free speech. I mean, he himself is more aligned with Omali in terms of the specific issue at hand being the Ukraine war. But generally speaking, he's not an African socialist, to put it mildly.
Right.
Well, I mean, as you've talked about, I mean, what is left and right anymore? You know, I used to consider myself a Democrat when the Democrats were anti-war, pro-healthcare, pro free speech. Now Democrats are pro-censorship, pro-war, and they oppose national healthcare. So I don't know, I don't know who's on the left and who's on the right, but if people are willing to explore the truth and not side with one party or another, or become beholden to corporate sponsors, then I think people can open their eyes and see the truth. And I think that's, that to me is what media is about.
Yeah.
So,
I think that I agree with you, Attorney Goodman. And I just think that, Tucker Carlson is part of a movement of people who believe in the First Amendment. And they believe in free speech. And he said, I can't say I agree with Chairman O'Malley Shatella, but I will defend his right to speak. And that is what is being asked for here, not that somebody would become an African internationalist or join the Uhuru movement, but defend this right of African people to have what the chairman calls anti-colonial free speech, not just free speech for some at the expense of others. And I think that it's very interesting, and indeed, that Tucker Carlson and others from that sector across this political spectrum have been able to support Chairman O'Malley Shatella. So we have to fight for this right, this First Amendment that we're supposed to have.
Yeah, and I think we also have free speech in this country up until a point. You're allowed to say whatever you want. If you want to talk baseball, if you want to talk movies and show business, if you want to talk politics to a certain extent, as long as you stay within that Overton window, yeah, you can speak, as long as your speech doesn't have too much influence in ways that powerful people don't want it to. And that is, I think, a big part of this case is that, the African People's Socialist Party was among the first organizations to really step on this third rail after February of 2022 and say that this Ukraine war was provoked. We were not on YouTube at the time, but we were sort of, in the podcasting space, we were aware of things. The same thing, whether it was an event like January 6th, an event like COVID or the Ukraine war, or since then, obviously, October 7th, immediately after a major event, there is a blitz of very draconian censorship that follows in the immediate short term after something. And then it somewhat loosens up over time as the truth gets out there, because they always want to censor the truth about these things. They don't want to censor the crackpots. The crackpots are no threat to anybody. People who tell the truth are the ones who are a threat. They're the ones who they censor. And that's what happened here. And I think a big part of this is that the African People's Socialist Party were among the first to speak out about this at a time when it was especially dangerous to do so.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And again, that is the consistent history of the African People's Socialist Party all the way back after September 11th in 2000.
Well, yeah, obviously, yes.
Yeah, the party took a stand that, no, you can't invade Afghanistan. This is not an excuse to invade Afghanistan or Iraq. Right. And took that stand very, very powerfully at that time, and which was not the popular stand in the world. And this is just how, this is always how it's been, because the African People's Socialist Party upholds the right of oppressed and colonized people, and anybody who is a victim of U.S. imperialism and imperialist war to have self-determination and the right to be free and self-determining.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize the point that you made about telling the truth in real time when it could make a difference, because, it's okay now to say, yeah, there were no weapons of mass destruction. That was a lie. It's okay now to even say that, the CIA helped overthrow the elected president of Iran in 1953 or 55. It's okay to say that. In fact, it was admitted decades later. But at the time when it actually could have made a difference in terms of our relations with Iran, you can't say it. And I think that's also something that was so dangerous about Julian Assange, is that he was reporting indisputable facts, documented facts in real time when people could actually take action. So to me, that's really the critical thing, is the timing of this. The fact that, they were out there early in February of 2022, and next thing you know, a SWAT team shows up at their homes and their businesses.
Right. So we have a couple of different events that we definitely want to plug here. The political prosecution of the Uhuru 3, the First Amendment, on trial on Wednesday, August 21st, 7 p.m. Eastern. You guys are having a Zoom call. O'Malley will be on there. Penny, Leonard, you'll be on there too, with a host of others. So people can register for that at handsoffuhuru.org/legal. And then you obviously have an in the street action here. Hands off Chairman O'Malley Yeshitela dropped the charges on the Uhuru 3 Saturday, August 31st at 11 a.m. And this is at the Uhuru House in 1245 18th Avenue South, St. Petersburg, Florida. So what is the importance of people getting involved and attending really both of these events, if possible? What is the urgency of these actions? You could take them in either order.
Just to say thank you so much for putting these out. The only way that we can win is to show the support from the hundreds of organizations that have come out to support, in many ways over the last 2 years, the Uhuru movement and the Hands Off Uhuru organization, and to show people in the street, to show the state, look, they can't railroad and use these obscure laws or, usage of the laws to frame up the leader of the Black liberation movement. They can't do that. And so we're calling on all out August 31st in St. Petersburg, Florida. That's the weekend before the trial starts, which is in the Middle District of Tampa, Florida, in federal court on beginning Tuesday, September 3rd, Tuesday, September 3rd, right after Labor Day. And, this is a mass mobilization, all out August 31st at the Uhuru House in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is right across the bridge from Tampa. So go to handsoffuhuru.org, find out more about this. You can see all the various motions and the indictment and all the webinars that we've done. And you can, people can contribute if they want. And just learn everything that you need, handsoffuhuru.org. Come to Florida, come to St. Petersburg, August 31st, join this rally and be at the trial September 3rd in Tampa.
Leonard, as someone who, spends time inside the courtroom, can you offer any insight as to what the scene outside the courtroom in the streets really means? Because I think a lot of people want to protest, they want to go make their voices heard, but they're afraid that, hey, no matter how many people there are outside, the judge is going to do what they're going to do. The system is going to operate as planned inside. We sent Russell to London to cover the Day X hearings, where Julian Assange was able to buy himself enough time to eventually strike this plea deal. And those activists said that the people out in the streets made a big difference. Mm-hmm. So as a lawyer who fights in the courtroom, what is the impact of the outside activism? What impact does that have inside the courtroom, if at all?
Well, lawyers are trained to fight cases in the courtroom. So, I'm not an expert on this, but what I'll say is that when you battle the federal government, they have unlimited resources. And so showing support, having supporters on your side, I think is really important. And, even this case, we're going to be on trial for a month, probably in September. This is a huge burden. I'm fortunate that I'm able to do it. And, it's important to me. It's an important case, but, most lawyers can't take a month to try a case in Florida. So,
why are you, not to interrupt, but why are you anticipating it going that long?
That's what the government said. They said they're going to put on 3 weeks of evidence. I don't know what they're going to put on because, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. I think they're going to call, they're going to try to put in conversations that they intercepted, you know, from the cloud between certain Russians that have nothing to do with our client, and try to get them in and try to get the judge to allow this in that has nothing to do with us.
Rachel Maddow will have to take the stand.
Maybe
she could probably get it through a couple days right there.
They have 2 experts that they want to call Russia experts to basically talk about how Russia is an authoritarian state, and
in the Soviet Union, right? They want
to give the history of the Soviet Union and their intelligence agencies, and they want to basically, it's fear mongering, and they want to say that if you associate with Russia, you're endangering the security of the United States. That's basically amazing. The message.
Wow.
Now that's all going to be litigated in the next couple of weeks with the judge. So we're hoping we have a very good judge, and I think the judge is not going to allow a lot of this stuff, but we'll see. There's also a motion to dismiss pending that's not yet decided that basically says you can't prosecute people for political speech, and there's a lot of Supreme Court law that supports that. So, that is still pending. The judge hasn't decided. He told us to get ready for trial, but he still hasn't ruled on that motion. So there's a lot of uncertainty, but the government does predict that their case is they're going to put on 3 weeks worth of evidence.
That's just amazing. So you've been informed by the prosecutors that they intend to basically do a 3-week course in anti-communism, basically. I mean, if we're
what it looks
cutting
like.
through the bullshit, right?
Yeah,
that's basically what it is. As evidence in a criminal trial?
We'll see
they
what
have
they
no
come up
evidence.
with.
I mean, that's
unbelievable. There's no evidence that these folks are agents of Russia.
That's unbelievable.
Their relationship with Russian nationalists, the same in the relationship with nationals anywhere. They ally on certain issues. They disagree on other issues. There's no evidence that they're agents or that they're taking orders. And the statute requires proof that they're under the direction and control of the government of Russia.
Wow.
It's absurd. So
it's ridiculous. And it's also racist that it's saying that Black people can't determine what the reality they face, that they don't have the ability to sum it up and fight against it. They need a Russian to tell them.
Well,
it's really
I can't speak to that, but they've been saying the same thing since O'Malley's been saying the same thing since the 70s. He was part of the SNCC movement, and so I don't know how all of a sudden you can be speaking for Russia when you're saying the same thing you've been saying for decades. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't think it's going to make sense to a jury, but that's our fight that we're going to be in starting September 3rd in Tampa.
All right. Well, the 2 events here, we want to plug again. The Zoom call, you can register at handsoffuhuru.org/legal. That's virtual. Anybody can sign on from anywhere. And then obviously the street action, August 31st at 11 a.m. In St. Petersburg at the Uhuru House.
Yes.
Those are urgent there, so make sure you can participate in both of them if you can, and no matter what, at least be on that Zoom call, which you could sign into, I should say, from anywhere in the world. And like I said, once again, I am flabbergasted to hear that this is going to be a weeks-long trial. But given that, whoever has time, if you do, if you don't, I understand. But if anybody would like to come on during the trial and give us an update on how things are going, if you're at liberty to do so, I don't know how that works. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a simple country podcaster here. But our door is always open to you guys. So Penny Hess, Leonard Goodman, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you so much.
Right.
It was a pleasure.
Please clap.